On today's Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, Trent and Biz back together. Jace, he was at Kids Day. We'll get his thoughts. Fall camp is underway, going strong. We'll talk a lot of football today. Brian Ferentz, a motion for summary. What does that mean? Well, the good news is JC's a lawyer. He can help us out. And we make some picks. It's time for Degenerate Life here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast.
Our Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back once again to the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent Condon, Biz with me here today. Jace, good to catch up with you once again. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen each and every day. So, Jace, it's been a couple of weeks since we got together. I took a trip to Las Vegas, and here we are now 12 days later, and I'm still struggling. Getting old sucks.
Well, like we said before we got on the air here, we used to go to Vegas quite a bit together, and it used to take 2 days to recover. Now, apparently, it takes you 2 weeks. So
it is a struggle.
I'm assuming since you're here, that means you didn't win big.
No, I entered in a couple of the contests. So if I become a millionaire, win the $6 million prize for Circa Survivor. Yeah, I don't know if you and me are going to be hanging out on podcast spaces anymore. The likelihood of that happening, though, not real high.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's some algorithms out there that
Right.
You're going to be battling against, Trent. Good luck with that.
Yes, well, we're going to get into some picks ourselves coming up this week. We'll try to make a little money here this season. Week 0 upon us. We get Nebraska, Northwestern, Illinois also in action as they take on Wyoming. So we got a pick for you later on in the program. But before we get into that, Biz, I was in Las Vegas when Kids Day was going on. So wanted to get your perspective. You made your way over to Kinnick Stadium here a couple of weeks back. What you saw, what you thought, takeaways from Kids Day.
You know, as far as Kids Days go, it was actually a little more, I would say, optimistic than most. The offense actually held their own against our defense, and we, I'd say there are definitely more positives than negatives to take away from Kids Day. So we'll start with the positives. Obviously, the kickers, I assume you saw, they were phenomenal. I mean, you really could not have asked for a better effort out of both kickers. And, you know, sometimes with Iowa kickers, they may go 8 for 8, but it's not the prettiest 8 for 8. But both of them, they really have, you know, in the past, Iowa's kind of split duties and have, you know, one be the field goal specialist and one be a kickoff specialist. I think both of them could probably cover both areas. They both have strong legs. They both did a really nice job with elevation and you know, I'll be interested to see what they do if Stevens or Blum, if they split it up somehow, or if they give it to one and let them run with it, because they both looked fully capable that day, at least. And there was, I mean, it wasn't like gale force winds, but it was probably a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind that day too.
So a little breeze out there. The biggest thing that you wondered about too is I saw both of them hit 53 yarders, but you wonder about trajectory. And from the reports that I saw, that appeared to be good too. It's not like, you know, there was no rush and they just had to drill, you know, a long line drive to get in there from 53. It looks like they also can get the height on the ball you need.
Yeah, and they both, I mean, these weren't 53 yarders that, you know, grazed the crossbar either. They both would have been good from 58 to 60. Not saying they're going to make 60-yard field goals, but they certainly have the ability to at least go to that distance. They're not Zach Brommer, let's put it that way.
Yes. The old walk-on, the Rudy story for Bags with Iowa, and it did not end up quite like Rudy at the end. Some of those misses in the 97 season, very frustrating. So the kickers, that's a positive. And the offense sounded like a positive. We know the defense is going to be ahead of the offense. It's just the way pretty much everywhere that it is. And certainly at Iowa throughout Kirk Ferentz's 24 years. The offense, though, was able to, run it a little bit. Offensive line, even with the injuries, look competent, to put it mildly, I guess.
Yeah. And Spencer Petras, you know, we've been critical of him when we need to be on here. So I'll give him his props when we can. He looked really good. I mean, he looked polished. He looked comfortable. He looked like a third-year starting quarterback. But will that translate over to 70,000 people in a couple of weeks? We'll see. But no, he looked totally in command of the offense and did the things you'd expect out of a third-year starter. And Padilla looked fine as well. I mean, he is what he is. I mean, you watch those two back-to-back. I mean, the arm strength is night and day different between the two. Yeah. I mean, a pass that Petras can just, Petras, he has his issues, obviously, but boy, he has an NFL arm when it comes to be able to throw a 20-yard out. I mean, he can do it with a flick of the wrist, and Padilla has to do a full body lean in to do that same throw. So, and then Joey Labus, I mean, clearly anybody that was there, anybody that's online saying Joey Labus should be our starter, obviously wasn't at Kids Day. I mean, he's clearly number 3. I mean, but having said that, he looked, he showed some glimpses and certainly didn't look bad either, but he's certainly not anywhere as comfortable running the offense as the other two. And like you said, the O-line in general, it was kind of slapped together, but they held their own, especially run blocking. They did a nice job, opened some holes, and I've been to Kids Days in the past where they've had to basically pull the first team defensive line because they're just destroying the O-line. That didn't happen here. I mean, they played a decent amount of one-on-one type stuff where they're going against Campbell and Van Ness and all those guys, and they held their own.
That's good. Yeah. I remember one of the open practices they had during a spring here in Des Moines over at Valley Stadium, and they had to take Drew Ott off the field. It was he was blowing up every single play in the offensive line, really struggled that season. So yeah, it can happen. So that's a positive to take away. I guess the other side would be, well, maybe the defense isn't as far along as you want, but I really struggle to come up with anything they can be concerned about defensively.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything that really jumped out. The defensive side of the ball, one way or the other, to be honest with you. Defense is what it is. I mean, you and I have talked about it in the past. In Phil, we trust. As long as Phil Parker's our defensive coordinator, we are going to be a good defense. The question is, can we be a great defense? I mean, that's honestly, we're so spoiled when it comes to defense. That really is the only question. Is it going to be a standard, really good Iowa defense, or can it be a, legendary great defense? And they've got the pieces there that, it could be one of those all-time great defenses, but, I guess we'll see on the defensive end. So the biggest takeaway, Trent, that I saw on Kids Day, though, didn't really have to do with offense or defense. It really had to do with recruiting. Iowa prides himself on being a developmental program, but the one thing I noticed just being there in person, the last 2 recruiting classes, we've recruited some dudes. We recruited some guys that are definitely more college ready than your average Iowa recruit. I mean, you look across the board, the 2021 class, you've got, Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson, and Connor Colby, who all played significantly last year and certainly held their own. And then you got that Cooper DeJean and guys like Jennings Dunker, who are just, I mean, they're freaks athletically at their positions. And then the current class, I wrote down, there was 5 guys that just didn't look like your average Iowa recruit coming in. Obviously, you got Wampa and Graves. You hear about those two all the time. But TJ Hall, I mean, I thought he looked really, really comfortable at the cornerback position. And then both running backs. I mean, both running backs are not your average Iowa. Usually Iowa running backs take 2-3 years to kind of develop and get to a point where they can contribute. I think both of them will, or at least one of them for sure, will contribute at least somewhat this year. I mean, they both. There's just across the board those last 2 recruiting classes. We've done a better job of bringing in some guys that can contribute right away.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that running back spot too, and those 2 guys that I think can add a different dimension. Caleb Johnson comes in; he's already physically put together. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds. I mean, he just looks like a monster. But I'm excited, Jazion Patterson, just because he's a different kind of running back. A little smaller, 5'9", a little shiftiness with what they already have with both LaShawn and Gavin Williams, 2 guys that run it really hard. Maybe don't have that breakaway speed. Would Patterson be that guy that maybe could pop and hit that 60-yard touchdown?
He didn't play. He didn't play a ton at Kids Day, so I can't sit here and say that. Yeah, he would. I mean, he was definitely, I thought, the 4th option.
Okay.
Third option at Kids Day because Gavin Williams didn't play.
Yep.
But the one thing I noticed about him, I thought he looked bigger than I expected. I thought he was going to be Akram Wadley small.
Mm-hmm.
When Wadley first came in, he weighed what, 165, 170.
Yeah.
And obviously we know the story. The coaching staff obviously wanted him to gain weight, and that took some time. I think Patterson's probably a legit 190 already.
Oh, wow.
On the flip side of that, Caleb Johnson probably wasn't quite as big as I thought he was going to be. I mean, he's definitely bigger than Patterson, but he's not. He's not like LaShawn Daniels big, where he's small enough that he's still pretty. He's got some shiftiness to him a little bit too. I mean, the difference between the two of them wasn't as pronounced as I thought it would be. I'd say Caleb Johnson probably weighs 210 and Patterson probably weighs 190. So I mean, they're not. It's not the difference between, like I said, Akram Wadley and LaShawn Daniels, where you're talking about 240 and 165.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Final thing, and this away from Kids Day, but to the wide receiver position, it becomes certainly a big question mark. We hear about now a foot injury to Nico Rigaini. You have Keegan Johnson, who's back on the practice field, at least according to a picture. How back is he? We still don't officially know there. That wide receiver spot, we knew it was dangerously thin coming into the year, and it sounds like it's even worse here as we sit on August 25th.
Yeah, and honestly, I marked down, Trent, that was my only negative to talk about from Kids Day, because I just talked about the recruiting classes and how we have brought in some college-ready guys. I mean, just the eye test, looking at our wide receivers, boy, they don't exactly pass the eye test from a physical standpoint. Because Keegan Johnson didn't play that day, but you've got a lot of 6 foot or smaller wide receivers, and none of them are proven at this point. Outside of Bruce was the only one that day that really had any experience, and his experience is pretty limited. So, yeah, I mean, it's a razor thin at this point. I hope Rigaini's injury is minor. I hope Keegan Johnson's back, because they're going to need all hands on deck. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, Spencer Petras can take a huge leap forward, but if he doesn't have anybody to throw the football to, that's hard. I mean, You saw a few years, that CJ Beathard year when we had nobody to throw the ball to. CJ Beathard was a really good quarterback, but you can't magically force people to get open. And that's going to be. It certainly was the number one concern I saw 10 days ago, and I don't think that's changed in the last 10 days.
Well, Biz, we go from that Kids Day thoughts and fall camp thoughts to Brian Ferentz asking for a motion for summary judgment. I have no idea what that means. Luckily for all of our listeners and viewers, you were a lawyer. When we come back, we'll figure out exactly what that means. Biz is going to fill us in. It's a Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. It can happen so easily. You're out with your friends or a few coworkers, putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. It's time to go, and for a moment, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you're a good driver. You live nearby. You have all the excuses. You can make it home okay. What are the odds you get pulled over? Even so, what's the worst that can happen? Lose your license, your job, total your car? Could be even worse than that. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. Trent Cotton and Jace Bisgard back with you. It's the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. All right, Biz, so we went into that talking a little bit about, of course, the lawyer side of your world. So you got to fill us in. Brian Ferentz asking, what is this? A motion for summary judgment. I have no clue. Fill us in.
Yeah, this is unfortunately, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is what I do for a real job. So is do litigation work. So first off, I don't know what you paid attention to or didn't pay attention to yesterday, but Scott Docterman, I think, was the first one to just tweet it out that this motion for summary judgment had been filed, and his attorney. The main attorney that filed it is somebody I know really well. He's a very good, very experienced litigator, and his office is actually directly upstairs from mine. And he's somebody that certainly knows his way around the courtroom and knows his way around filing a motion for summary judgment. So if you take the time to read the 65-page motion or the 500 pages of documents that were attached to it, I mean, you come away thinking, boy, Brian Ferentz did nothing wrong here. And that's what the point of a motion for summary judgment is. Basically what it is, is their argument that Brian Ferentz should be dismissed from the case and a judge should rule on it and dismiss the case because there's no merit for it. The standard is if there's no genuine dispute about any of the material facts, then a judge can rule and kick out either part of the case or all of the case. But what's going to happen here, Trent, is in the next couple of weeks, you're going to get to hear the other side of the story. The other side is going to file a resistance to this motion. The resistance, I'm sure, is going to be 50 plus pages long and probably have, hundreds of pages of documents attached to the other side. But, the likelihood that this motion gets granted in its entirety is probably slim to none. Motion or summary judgment, in general, judges are somewhat hesitant to grant them, especially in cases like this, because generally there is some dispute of material facts that the other side can at least make a legit argument that it should go to a jury. And that's all this is saying. If it gets, if it gets granted, then the case is gone. But if it denied, all that means is that the case continues to move forward, and it'll likely get to a jury. But the thing that just blows my mind, Trent, I always have to get up and walk around the room and calm myself down a little bit because, when these things get posted, by Scott Dockerman or other people online, I kick myself for reading the comments, and it always just makes me realize that very few Iowa fans are lawyers and don't understand what they're looking at, and B, very, very few Iowa fans are unbiased in this situation. And boy, the amount of people I saw, that immediately jumped to Rob Howe and Pat Hardy, Brian Ferentz an apology and those types of things. I just, there are times when I immediately kick myself for going to the comments because it does not give me a very favorable impression of the Iowa fans that comment on these things online. So there's your quick rundown of what's happening. But again, the motion is very well done. His attorneys know what they're doing. That they're, is there a possibility that part of the case might get kicked out? Yeah, I think part of it will. But I think the likelihood that Brian Ferentz gets 100% dismissed from the case is probably slim to none.
So the likelihood is it's not going to be dismissed on the Brian Ferentz side of things. We'll get the other side then, the people that are coming to with the documents that they're going to have. Ultimately, does this get to trial, or is the end game probably going to be some kind of settlement before it gets to court?
Boy, I sure hope it doesn't go to trial. I mean, this is the type of case that to me just screams a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement involved with it, where my guess is once the motions get ruled upon at some point, probably after the football season concludes, you're going to get a generic headline of cases settled, and it's the terms of the settlement are confidential. But there's just, to me, there's way too much at stake on both sides to take this to trial. I mean, it would be, regardless, even if Iowa wins at trial and they get a full defense verdict for everybody, Iowa loses because all their dirty laundry just got aired in court. And but I probably would have said the same thing with the lawsuit involving the female coaches also. And Iowa was dumb enough to take that to trial also. And we saw what happened there. So, but I will say that they brought in some different counsel to be involved in this case. And like I said, I know the counsel they have involved. I think that he may probably have some different advice for them when it comes to trying to get this case resolved.
Well, if you want more, Jace can help you out on Twitter at Jace Hawk. And if you have any lawyer questions, he can help you out there trying to sift through this, because this is, as you know, well above my head. Good stuff, though, Biz. And I think you put it very succinctly and kind of understanding exactly what this means for us people that are not lawyers and have no clue. Luckily, a whole lot inside the courtroom.
Well, and if you've got 3, 4, or 5 hours to burn, Trent, it really is an interesting. It is an interesting read because they've attached, the appendix. They attach all the documents that they address in the motion, and so they include portions of the deposition transcripts from all 9 or 10 athletes that are suing, and it's an interesting read. So if you're if you're painfully bored some night and your kids go to bed early, at least skim through the deposition transcripts because it's interesting. But again, they also cherry picked the parts of the deposition that were good for them. So, you're only getting half the story at this point.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense. All right, Biz, let's finish up as we talk about week 0. It is upon us. Football is finally here. Of course, no preseason in college football. We just jump right into it. Week 0 picks, and we got a couple of Big Ten games, including an all Big Ten tilt. The first game, it'll kick off Nebraska against Northwestern. The Cornhuskers, favored by 13.5 over-under in the game, sits at 50.5. We get Illinois then at 3 o'clock. A little bit later in the afternoon, heading to Dublin. And boy, Scott Frost, he can't lose this game, can he?
Yeah, yes, he can. Scott Frost can lose any game, Trent. But, he is the gift that just keeps on giving. His moronic comment about the 15 to 20 linemen thrown up each game. Like, what? He is – parts of me hope that Nebraska goes 7-5 this year because the longer he stays there, the better it is for Iowa football. Because I just don't see him. They've got some talent. They're going to win some games this year. Their schedule is easier. I mean, they're certainly not going to go 3-9 again. So, it would not break my heart to see them, go 6-6 or 7-5 or something like that, and get everybody pretending that he's turning the corner because I don't see it. I mean, and you and I have talked about before, when they hired him, I thought he was an absolute home run hire. I thought he was going to be, get them into national relevance again. And just the parallels and the similarities between him and Steve Alford just never quit. I mean, he just can't stop from making stupid comments. And at some point you realize that's not by accident. Maybe he's just not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Is he going to be starting to talk about?
Can he lose? Absolutely. Nebraska at this point, if we've learned anything, Nebraska can lose any game, anywhere, anytime. So going to Ireland, I'm sure they can lose over there as well.
Are we going to hear him?
That's another question.
Talking about December situations if they make a bowl game, like March situations for Steve Alford.
Yeah, it's the problem here, or I guess the thing here is Northwestern was just so awful.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back and look, they lost by 33 to Illinois to end the year last year. I mean, they just were getting stomped by teams at the end of the year. But Trent, it's an even year, which means Northwestern's probably going to go, 7-2 and win 7-2 in the West and somehow win it. So in order to do that, they probably got to go win on Saturday.
Well, we got a couple of odds I want to throw at you. First of all, division odds. This comes from FanDuel as they have it broken down by division. All right, this is where it currently is in the Big Ten West. I'll give you a $100 free play at the Condon Casino. Where would you fire at? Wisconsin, the betting favorite, plus 170. Nebraska is the second choice, 7-2, plus 350. Iowa at 4-1. Minnesota 5-1. Purdue 6-1. The Illini are 30-1, and then Pat's Cats, Northwestern 100-1. $100 free bet. What are you throwing it on?
Oh, with those odds, probably Minnesota or Purdue.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I'm Minnesota.
I don't love any of them, to be honest with you. But I think when you're looking at those odds, I think Minnesota or Purdue probably have as good a chance of anybody outside of Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's clearly the favorite, but I think you kind of lump Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Purdue all in the same category where if things break right and they have things go their way, they all could win the West this year. I mean, you're not going to be shocked if Purdue wins or Minnesota wins it. No. So since they've got the highest odds, give me Purdue, Trent. I mean, they're the highest odds of the 5, right?
You get Purdue. There you go. And it'd be $600 if you'd hit at the Condon Casino. We'll put that down for a preseason bet for you. One other one. So you look at the Big Ten odds as a whole. Obviously, Ohio State's a big betting favorite. They're basically minus 200 everywhere. Do you think there's value? I'm betting the Buckeyes right now. Look, whoever they play against the West in the championship game, they're going to be a huge favorite in there. Do you see any value betting the Buckeyes at that huge price, which I normally wouldn't do, but I've thought about it. In fact, last night I did make a wager. Ohio State minus 200 to win the Big Ten. Do you see any value there?
Value, no. I mean, I see where you're coming from in betting it, but minus 200, college football is entering such a weird frontier right now. I could see some of those teams, the Ohio States and not Alabama. Nick Saban's kind of bulletproof when it comes to these things. But I could see teams like Clemson or Georgia or Ohio State. Some of those teams I could see imploding this year, because if things start to go wrong, let's say Ohio State loses to Notre Dame week 1, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of guys that are making a whole bunch of money that may not be playing, and you got boosters. I mean, it's I think you're going to see more chaos when it comes to teams that you thought were going to be good, and if things don't go well, they just implode midway through the year. So, do I think that's going to happen with Ohio State? No, but I'm not sold on Ryan Day as this great, week in, week out manager of a team. And I think if they can make it, if they win the Big Ten, are they going to beat the team out of the Big Ten West? Yeah, probably. But Michigan State, Penn State, Michigan, all those teams are good enough. They could certainly beat Ohio State on a down day, and even us, we go there. After a bye week, there's a chance. So you add those up plus Notre Dame, there's 5 potential losses in there. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying no, Trent. I don't see value there.
At -200, yeah.
Terrible bet by you. Ohio State's going to go 7-5.
Well, I've made plenty of terrible bets, as you know, throughout the years. I just went down the rabbit hole. Well, more than anything, yesterday, I wanted to bet over on Illinois. They were 4.5. I think they're going to be a 5-win team at minimum again this year. Obviously, since they play Saturday, I knew I had to get that in. And then I look at my Circa app, and I'd made about a dozen bets last night in the future market. So I got a problem. As you know, I got just a little bit of a problem. You got a problem too. Do you got a week 0, bet for us this week?
Well, it's funny because you just mentioned the team I was going to bet on until I started digging around a little bit. I really liked Illinois at -10 or 10.5 or whatever it was at. But then I did some looking, and I didn't realize Illinois got a decent amount of starters coming back. But as far as like offensive production, I think they're like 115th or 120th in the nation. They've got to fill a lot of spots. Wyoming's in the same boat. Wyoming's only got like 8 or 9 starters coming back also. But that was my initial thought, was I like Illinois, but then I just decided to go back to the standard of give me Northwestern 13.5, Trent. It's just a straight homer pick this early in the year, but a couple reasons. One, I saw Northwestern's one of like 3 teams in the Big Ten that has both their coordinators back, and they've got, for better or for worse, they've got a lot of starters back and a lot of consistency back. Is that going to make Northwestern a good team this year? No, but I think it probably makes them a decent team in week 1. They've got a lot of consistency and a lot of, they know what they're doing. On the flip side, Nebraska's got 12 different transfers they're trying to squeeze in. And, I just, knowing Nebraska, they'll find a way to stumble around and make this a close game. So if you're going to give me Pat Fitzgerald and getting almost 2 touchdowns early in the year, Northwestern, last year excluded, Northwestern usually finds a way to ugly up these games and keep them close. So it's an even year. Give me the Wildcats and plus 13.5.
13.5. Well, I'm also going to take points with my week 1 pick. We're going to go to Las Cruces. So you got New Mexico State down there against Nevada. Since Nevada's on the schedule, I've taken a little look at them. They're going to be brutal. A lot of people think they might be one of the worst teams. Well, every year, New Mexico State is one of the worst teams in college football, but they got Jerry Kill. Jerry Kill is now the head coach there. Yeah, and that's enough for me. That's all I need. I need nothing else. I'm getting more than a touchdown at home. You don't just walk into Memorial Stadium down there in Las Cruces and get a win. Give me the Aggies plus 8.5 against Nevada.
Do you have any odds on whether Jerry Kill survives the season?
Well,
isn't that guy like beat death like 3 times? He just keeps going back.
Yeah, he'll be out there. He always finds a way. He always finds a way, and he's good against the spread. So a lot of Jerry Kill love here early in the season. That's what week 0 is for, guys like that.
Well, I think I've told you before, I'm neighbors like 3 houses down from Kelton Copeland. And Kelton doesn't talk a ton about, certainly about Iowa football and so that, and I don't ask. But the one guy that he will talk about and absolutely loves is Jerry Kill.
Oh, yeah?
Jerry Kill is kind of his mentor. I think he went up, Northern Illinois, and I think Jerry Kill was involved when he was in junior college way back in the day. So I know he's got a big fan of my neighbor.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Biz, we got our pick in for week 0. We'll be back next week with week 1 picks. It'll be game week next week. Are you ready?
Yeah, more than ready. It's time, Trent. It's been it feels weird that the last couple of years, for whatever reason, with COVID things and other things going on, you're never really even sure what's going to happen with the season. Really, all the games are going to happen. This year it feels like there's some normalcy back as far as at least knowing, hey, we're gonna play 12 games and hopefully win 70% of them at least. So.
Back to Iowa football. Good stuff. Biz, we'll do it again next week. Thanks for your time.
All right, go Hawks.